Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom, is a film readily found on any list of the most disturbing and extreme films ever made. Yet it stands out amongst its low budget and exploitation peers with a refined set of aesthetic and philosophical intentions, brought to the screen by poet turned filmmaker Pier Paolo Pasolini. It is a serious piece of political filmmaking, which also contains some of the most heinous acts ever committed to film. The film takes inspiration from the true story of the last days of Mussolini's fascist government in 1943, where they formed a de facto state in the Italian town of Salo. Pasolini then weaves in literary themes inspired by the Marquis de Sade's novel The 120 Days of Sodom to illuminate the depraved ideology of a group of fascist libertines. A group of teenagers are imprisoned, tortured and degraded, but the film does not portray these things lightly. It is a fierce attack on fascism, authority, capitalism and state power, with Pasolini himself describing it as a metaphor for what power does to the human body. Salo was first submitted to the BBFC in January 1976, and it was refused a certificate on a charge of gross indecency, defined in British law as anything which an ordinary decent man or woman would find to be shocking, disgusting or revolting, or which offended against recognised standards of propriety. The indecency law specified that if any scene in a film was found to be indecent, the film as a whole would be liable for prosecution, even if the scene was justifiable within the context of the film. The indecency law also contained no consideration for the social or artistic value of a film text which may justify its release. The more notorious censorship law, the Obscene Publications Act, which became central to the prosecution of the video nasties, was not applied to film until 1977. James Ferman was the newly appointed BBFC secretary in 1975, and Salo was to be a film which would illustrate the problematic contradictions of Ferman's attitudes to film censorship. Ferman had no problem censoring or placing outright bans on films he considered too dangerous for a mass audience, but with art house pieces or works by auteur directors, Ferman was much less likely to impose any cuts or bans. Although originally released before his tenure at the BBFC, Ferman was squeamish about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In a notorious quote given at the London Film Festival in 1974, he said, "It's alright for you middle-class cineasts to see this film, but what would happen if a factory worker in Manchester happened to see it?" And in an interview from 1999, Ferman explains why he passed Michael Haneke's Funny Games uncut. It's an Austrian film with subtitles about a middle-class family being under assault, and in a sense, it's a self-selecting audience. And I think probably we felt that the people that might get off in the movie in the wrong way probably wouldn't find their way into it. Regarding Salo, upon its submission, Ferman described the film as one of the most disturbing films ever to be seen by the board, yet its purpose is deeply serious. It is quite certainly shocking, disgusting and revolting, but it is meant to be. It wants us to be appalled at the atrocities of which human nature is capable when absolute power is wielded corruptly. This admiration for Pasolini's vision meant Ferman did not want to cut the film to solve its pending legal problems. The original distributor, United Artists, passed the rights on to another distributor, Cinecittà, who requested an X-certificate version, which at the time X referred to explicit content and was for over 16s. Ferman advised Curtis Elliott of Cinecittà to show the film on the film club circuit, which was a way films could be shown uncertified and without permission from local authorities at private members' film clubs. The Sunday Mirror reported on July 17, 1977 that the film was playing at the Old Compton Cinema Club in Soho, London. So far refused a certificate of any kind, his nauseating last work can now be seen at the Compton Cinema Club by any adult with a sufficient stomach and £2.50 in hand. However, only a few days later, the cinema was raided by police and the film confiscated. A furious Elliot turned to Ferman for answers. "We followed your advice and the film has been seized by police. I've never had the police in my office until I showed this film, which you said was reputable." It was an awkward affair for Ferman, but it coincided with a change in the law in 1977 which meant that film now came under the Obscene Publications Act, and therefore the charges against the film went no further. At the request of Cinecittà, Ferman conceded to create a new cut of the film which would comply with the new law. This process led to the club cut of Salo, which had 6 minutes of difficult material removed and included a contextual prologue and epilogue explaining the sad and the fascist historical backdrop to the movie. Ferman also decided to switch the English dubbed version and source original Italian subtitled prints, explaining, thus those who might misunderstand the film would be far less likely to see it. Despite this new safe edit, a second police raid happened in 1979 when the club cut was confiscated and the film faced further legal problems. In a letter to Sir Thomas Hetherington, the Director of Public Prosecutions, on the 6th of June 1979, Ferman argued the case for Salo and its history of the censors since 1976. I was astonished to learn that none of your present advisers see the film as a work of art or sense the degree to which the context provide a criticism and condemnation of the behaviour portrayed. In this, they are out of step with the opinion of most of the artistic establishment in this country and throughout the world, and also with members of my board. Ferman's appeal was successful and the charges were dropped. So, with the case of Salo, Ferman was a liberal battling legal authorities who did not understand great art. Yet many other important movies were to remain difficult to see in the UK until the end of Ferman's BBFC tenure in 1999. The club cut continued to play uncertified through the 70s and 80s, and it was not until October 2000 that it was resubmitted to the BBFC by the British Film Institute. This time it was passed uncut with an 18 certificate. The BBFC state that, although the film was undeniably and intentionally shocking, it did not contain anything that would deprave and corrupt viewers. Its intention was to deliberately shock and appall audiences at the evil of fascism. So you've been watching Cinema Subculture. That was the story of Salo and its history with the British censors. If you've enjoyed this video, you might want to check out our other video essays on Video Nasties, Crash or the Bunny Game. Please subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching.